Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Star Wars themed video. Um, this is going to be the second time that I am going to be speaking in a soft spoken voice. In many of my other videos, I've been whispering, so I figured I would do some soft spoken talking in this. So, forgive me, I may say a lot, but that's just because it takes a lot for me to speak slowly. I tend to talk kind of quickly, so uh, you may hear me do a lot of uhs just to kind of drag it out and make it really relaxing. So, in this video, I'm going to be talking about a tabletop game. It's a Star Wars roleplay game, very similar to Dungeons and Dragons, something you can directly compare it to. Most people have heard of that game, so this game is very similar. It's very fun. This video is going to be full throttle nerd, just completely nerdy, and uh, you know, I think that most people who watch ASMR like either some kind of nerd culture or like movies, video games. There's a lot of introverted people who like ASMR, at least from my experience, and that comes usually introverted people like to, maybe they have hidden hobbies that they don't really tell other people. Maybe they like to draw or they really enjoy reading. Um, and I think that kind of goes hand in hand with nerdiness a little bit. People who are considered to be nerdy tend to be introverted. Um, so I think this video will hopefully be enjoyable for a lot of people. Not to say that everyone who watches this is a nerd, but if you are introverted and you like storytelling, you like the idea of imaginative gameplay, um, and you're not going to be tied to a computer screen, then I think this is something that you might be interested in. I don't want to do too much of an intro because I do want to get through as much as I can. This may be a pretty long video because I do want to go through a lot of this. Just kind of go through the rules, how you play, how you create a character, the combat in the game, storytelling. And that's the first thing about the game that makes it so much fun is if you know even just a little bit about the Star Wars universe, you can use this game to kind of expand upon that and create your own storylines, use your imagination, and you can create your own type of character, whatever you want. If you want to be a droid, you can be a droid. If you want to be a bounty hunter, you can do that. You can do lots of different things. So it's really taking the Star Wars universe and adapting it to however you want. And every game has a GM, which is the game master. This is the person who basically runs the show. They create the narrative for the other players to play in, and they create all the events. They go through the combat. They will make NPC characters or non-playable characters that the other players can interact with. Um, so the GM just controls everything and guides people along. Of course, people make their own decisions. They can do their own thing, but the GM kind of guides them in their journey. So we're going to talk about some of the aspects of the game. This is actually the first part that I think is important to talk about. If you know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, you may not know anything. You've probably seen these dice that players use, these multi-sided dice. In Star Wars, you do use dice. You don't use as many as you would in Dungeons and Dragons. There's also another game called Pathfinder, which is very similar. But in Star Wars, the dice are a little bit different. You can see their own unique kind of dice, and we'll talk about how they work. I won't go into in depth about this, but just to kind of let everyone know. So, whenever you do an action or an event happens um, a lot of times you will have to roll for a certain thing. So to give you an example, let's say you want to go buy a weapon, right? You want to go buy a blaster rifle, and you're a bounty hunter. You need a new weapon. You go into a shop. You go up to the store owner, and you say, "I'd like to buy a blaster rifle, please." And they say, "Okay, it costs $300." You say, "Oh, well, I don't want to pay that. I'll pay 200." What you can do in that situation, because you're negotiating with that person, you can use your dice to roll for negotiation. That is a skill that you can roll for. And now, depending on how many points you have in that skill, you can have more dice. If you don't have many ranks in that certain skill, then you will roll less dice, and then every roll will go against these dice right here. These are difficulty dice and the challenge dice. So um, any task that you will roll against will have a difficulty dice, and this is determined by the GM. Sometimes it's on the fly. The GM might just decide, well, let's say you want to pick a lock or you want to open a door and you have to do some kind of hacking into the mechanical system or something. The GM can decide, well, this is a really difficult door to unlock, so it's going to be a hard difficulty, or it's easy, or whatever. So each task will have a rank of difficulty, and that's going to be set. So um, once the difficulty dice is set, you can look at how much dice you will have, and if you have more of either the green or the yellow dice, then you have a better chance of succeeding in that. So in that negotiation example I gave, if you roll the dice and it succeeds, then you will be able to pay only $200 for that. Now, there's more to it than that. As you can see on this green dice, this little explosion, that is considered a success. These little symbols right here, on this, you see the big one on the yellow dice, that's called an advantage. So something can succeed, but in addition, there can also be an advantage, right? So let's go back to that example of getting the blaster rifle. You can go into the store. Let's say you roll your dice and you have more of these success symbols than you do of these little triangles. See on the red dice, these triangles. If you have more successes than the triangles are the these are the difficulty. There's a word for it. Um, It's just, yeah, I think it's just called difficulty. And then, oh, sorry, the challenge symbols are these little like empire symbols. So if you have more success symbols in your roll than you have triangles, then your action will succeed. And going back to this other symbol, the advantage, what could happen, and this is something that the player could do or the GM could do depending on the situation. If you succeed, there could also be an advantage. So let's say you pay $200 and the shop owner says, well, I only have one blaster rifle and it has a scope attached to it. So you can have the scope too. That's an advantage. It's like something extra that can also happen. So if you have more of these symbols, the advantage symbols, than you do of these little circles, then you would also have an advantage in addition to your success. So that's kind of how those dice work. There's one other symbol, or two other symbols. This one on the top here, this is called a triumph. Triumph is basically means that something awesome happens. So I guess the scope could count as a triumph. Usually you don't want to go over the top, like let's say you don't want to say, well, you got a triumph, that means you get the gun for free. That's a little bit too much. You want it to be something that fits the situation, and I think the GM decides what the triumph is going to be. Or it depends, actually. It does depend. The player might choose sometimes. Um, then on the other hand, you may have this. This is called a despair. Um, and what that could mean in the example I'm giving with the shop owner let's say you buy the gun, you take it outside, and you notice that it's broken, or something is wrong with it. Something is mechanically wrong, and now you have a broken gun, or maybe it doesn't do as much damage, or something. There's a lot of different examples. So those are the main dice. I don't want to talk too much about dice. There's a force dice which does its own thing. I won't talk about it. These two dice are pretty simple. There could be situations where there are other factors involved that might boost the situation. Let's say I'm trying to keep with the same example so that we can kind of build this one example. So let's say you're trying to roll for negotiation with the shop owner, and the shop owner's in a really good mood, right? Um, and this could be a storyline that the GM decides. Oh, the shop owner's in a really good mood. So every negotiation you do, you get a blue dice, which gives you a little bit extra. Some of the sides are blank, so you may not get any help from that dice, but sometimes you will get, some more advantage or another success, and something like that. And then on the other side, this black dice is the setback dice. Let's say the shop owner is in a bad mood. That means that the GM might decide to add a black dice because it's going to be harder for that negotiation roll to succeed. So that's a general overview of the dice. It's actually a pretty simple system. In general, these types of games, Dungeons & Dragons, these tabletop roleplay games can be really, really complicated. So I think Star Wars actually makes this kind of stuff pretty easy. You get used to it after a while. And there's other stuff too. We're not going to go through all this. You can see there's 213 pages in this. I'm not going to go through all of it. We're going to skip ahead through a lot. So I want to go through kind of the main stuff. The dice is pretty important. And then we can talk about creating characters. I'm not going to go into all the aspects of creating a character, but when you create a character, it's basically whatever you want. So you can have an idea of who you want beforehand. Like I said, you could be a bounty hunter if you wanted to. You could be a smuggler. You could be a Jedi or a Sith if you choose. And there's a lot of different possibilities. So I'm going to skip through a lot of this. Hopefully I can get to something I kind of want to get to the character creation next. So this talks about checks. Checks is what I was talking about. Whenever you're trying to accomplish something, a task, you will roll. And there is a table that shows all of the different skills that you can use. I do want to show that because that is actually a pretty good chart to see. Obligations, let's see, it's very in-depth, this kind of stuff. You can see it's super nerdy. So every character, of course, they have some kind of health. Their health is their wounds. Strain is basically mental toughness. So, let's talk about combat because combat is very easy with strain. Let's say you're in combat and you want to, let's say you want to aim your gun, right? You can use one of your strain numbers. You have a threshold. You can use one of your strain numbers to aim better, and that will allow you to get maybe a blue dice on your combat roll when you aim your gun or something. You can use strain to get these small advantages in situations, and that's like mental toughness, or you can use it to maybe go undercover or something. You can use it for different things. Your defense is basically, if you don't have much defense unless you have armor that has it. Your soak value is basically how much damage you take that you soak up before you take real damage. This is, again, getting very in-depth. I don't want to go too much into it. Here we go, creating a character that's Chewie right there. So, there are several steps to doing it. First, you want to determine your character's background. You want to pick obligation is actually not super important. Their species is pretty important to know. Their career, their specializations, in their career. So you see, there's a lot that goes into this. And then when you start the game, you get these experience points. This is basically what you use to buy stats for different skills and stuff. And then the last is determine your stats, which is what I was talking about. So the negotiation, that's one of the derived stats that I was talking about. And then there's more, there's a lot of stuff. All right, we're gonna skip obligation. A lot of this is scrolling, but it's because there's a lot of extra stuff. So here's some species. Bothans. Bothans they have very strong willpower. They're good spies. You can see you can be a Bothan, a droid, Gand, human. And each species, of course, has its own advantages. So a Bothan has good willpower, which means that it can. Willpower is basically your determination, your fortitude, like mental fortitude, I guess. There is intelligence as well, or intellect. It's a little bit different. And intellect is basically just like intelligence, where willpower is like your determination, your like mental resilience. So Bothans have good willpower. Droids have basically even stats, but they have a lot of other advantages, like they don't need to breathe, they don't need to eat, they don't need to sleep. That actually helps a lot in the game. So they do have some advantages, even though their base stats are really weak. Gans, I think, are, I don't know, I'll have to look. Humans are basically, they have even stats for everything, but they do get some other advantages. So Gans are, so discipline, willpower. They have high willpower, Gans, that ugly yellow one. Humans, you see 222 for all of these. These are characteristics. These are different from stats. Is going into some really complex stuff in the game, but the characteristics and the skills are related to each other. Again, some species are stronger, some species have better presence, others are smarter, so they have better intellect, others are more cunning. This is more like personality. Cunning. Agility is, of course, agility. Willpower is, again, kind of mental fortitude. Resilience. Brawn is strength. Presence is basic. Well, it's also personality, but it's, they're more outgoing. They have better oratory skills, that kind of stuff. Whereas cunning is more, they're sneakier. They're cunning. It's pretty self-explanatory. So you have Rodians. This is, that infamous scene from that, what is that called? Oh, I'm drawing a blank on the cantina. The cantina scene where who shot first? Was it Han Solo? Or Greedo? That's a Rodian. Trandoshan, pretty ugly guy. Twi'lek, and a Wookiee. Now, believe it or not, this is a book that I'm going through. There are other books out there. This is not the only one. There are different game types of this. So this is called Edge of the Empire. There's also a Jedi one, that Jedi focused one. This is more like smugglers, and Edge of the Empire meaning like kind of the underground of Star Wars a little bit. That's what this book focuses on. But it does have a lot of the same stuff that other books do. So Wookiees, of course, are super strong. They have 3 brawn. So the career. You see, we have a bounty hunter. You can be one of those. I talked about the specializations. So if you could be an assassin, you could be a survivalist. And all these will basically adjust which skills you go into. So we talked about the negotiation. There's also resilience, survival, knowledge, computers. There's so many different things. And that's why I'm trying to look for that chart. I'm actually going to skip all the character stuff here because there's a lot of character stuff. These are all the classes. I'm going to try to get to, I think I skipped a bunch. Oh wait, no. Skills. Here we go. So this is what I was talking about before. This is the chart right here. So you see, I mentioned negotiation, and I also said that players have um, characteristics. So as I said, the Wookiees have more brawn, presence. We just talked about all that stuff. So when you roll your dice, I'm not going to go too much into this again, but your rank in each of these things will affect how much dice you have, as well as what kind of dice you have. You can have green dice, you can have yellow dice. Yellow dice give you a little bit more than the green dice, and there's a way to calculate how much dice you use in each roll. It's actually not too hard, but I'm not going to really talk about it because it's not super important. But let's say you have a Wookiee, right? And you want to make that Wookiee really strong. So when you're putting ranks into skills, you might want to focus on brawl, athletics, melee attacking, resilience. That's what you might. So it depends on what your character is, what you want to do. There was one game I played where I played like a hacker type character. So I put a bunch of ranks in computers. I also did mechanics as well. I also did there's some knowledge ones as well. I think I don't know if I. Oh yeah, these are the knowledge ones. Underworld is one of the knowledge ones. Um, I think I did education as well. That there there can be education checks as well. So depending on who you are, you might want to go for certain skills. And again, these are all checks, so I can actually give examples, maybe of each one. I'll give an example. This video is going to be long, so you can skip ahead if you're not interested in this, but just when you're in the game, just to give you an idea of a situation where you might do a roll of each of these. So, astrogation. Pretty simple. Let's say you're in a ship in space, and you need to find a certain planet. You might have to roll for astrogation. Let's say the computers on your let's say someone has fired at your ship and one of your computers has your ship computers has been destroyed. You may roll for astrogation to try to repair it. Now you can also roll for mechanics there, but it's really has to do with space and navigation in space. Um, Athletics. This is pretty simple. It's actually a check that might happen a lot. Anytime someone has to jump over an obstacle, make a really a kind of difficult maneuver, they roll for athletics. This actually happens a lot where people have to jump stuff, climb something. You'll roll for athletics. Brawl is basically a fist fight. Anytime someone's punching and they're not using a weapon, that's a brawl check. So let's say you're in a bar, someone gets angry at you, they punch you, you will then have to roll for brawl. Charm is a presence skill. Let's say you're let's say you're a male, you're talking to a very pretty female vendor. You're trying to buy a weapon, you can roll for charm, and that might give you a discount or something. You can do that as an example. Coerce, I love this one. Coerce is very good. A lot of Jedi have very strong coercion. Let's say you want to get someone to do something that they don't want to do. You can roll for coerce. Now, Jedi, of course, will have pretty strong coercion because they have the power of the Force. So this can be, let's say you have an enemy who is going to set off the alarm. You want to coerce them not to do it. You can roll for that. Computers can be used in many different ways. Of course, if you're trying to hack some kind of network, if there's a mechanical door that needs to be opened, you might roll for computers as well. Let's say someone's trying to hack into one of your systems. You can do a defensive computer check. A lot of options for that. Cool is actually super important. So if you have a group of players, before you start to do actions, you will have to figure out who goes first, and you roll based on your cool. Because if you have more cool, basically calmness, able to handle a situation well. So if you're figuring out who's going to have the initiative in a situation, whoever has the best cool is the one who's going to be able to act first. Um, so that skill is basically used um, in a situation where you're trying to figure out who goes first, or let's say something is really stressful is happening, you may have to roll for that as well. Coordination is similar to athletics, but of course it has to do with coordination rather than like just jumping over a wall. Let's say you need to walk on a ledge of a building in a situation, you may have to roll for coordination, or it could be different things too. Let's say you're driving a speeder bike and you you hit a rock and the bike kind of wiggles a little bit. You might need to roll for coordination to get it back on track or something. And again, so this is all open. It's up to the GM to decide what roles they want to do. Um, I'm not going to go through all these actually. There's a lot here. So um, some other ones that we might talk about. Deceit is pretty interesting. This is basically if you have to lie, if you want to lie about something. Discipline is if something's, again, something stressful is happening. Let's say you're face to face against a Rancor, right? Very frightening beast. The Rancor pit in the Return of the Jedi. When Luke and Leia and Han Solo are with Jabba the Hutt, and they get dropped into that pit. If you're facing a really scary monster, you might have to roll for discipline to kind of make sure that you're cool in the situation. So it's kind of similar to cool in that way. Um, Medicine, if you want to heal somebody, there are these medical packs, stim packs you can use. You can roll for medicine. Perception is actually super huge too, because a lot of times characters need to see what's around them. Um, and I've GM'd a couple times, and I use perception rolls a lot, because what I like to do is, if whoever gets the highest roll of perception, I tell them that they see something extra. They see a bonus thing that may help them in their storyline, and maybe all the other players don't see this, and then let's say the lowest person, let's say their low roll, they don't see anything, So I like to show different players different things in the storyline, just to kind of make them feel like they're more involved, or they're involved in their own storyline. I like to do that a lot. Skullduggery is interesting. Skullduggery is basically um, doing shady stuff. Like, so picking a lock is one. Trying to knock open a box. Trying to scrounge for parts, and and let's say there's a big pile of parts. Trying to scrounge for that. It's basically um, kind of doing sketchy stuff. Like doing stuff you're not supposed to, like illegal stuff, kind of. It's very similar. Cunning is a good way. It's someone who's like sneaky and a thief kind of role, I guess. Stealth is something you might have to use a lot as well. Pretty self-explanatory. So that's a pretty good overview of some of the skills. So we can move on. Here, this talks about all the skills here. See, I'm skipping ahead pretty quick here. So, and overall, this game is just really fun. If you're interested in this, you can definitely leave a comment or send me a message or something, just to kind of, maybe you want to learn more about it, or you can buy your own book. They're pretty expensive. I think they're like $50. If you're interested in doing it, maybe getting friends together to do a game or something, I would encourage you to do it. It's very fun. It just really allows you to expand your love for Star Wars, and again, just kind of embrace the nerdiness of it, because it is super nerdy, but it's really fun. So as long as you don't embarrass yourself doing it, which there's no reason you should, you should try it if you're interested. So those are skills. Talents, these have to do with your career and your specialization. I'm not going to go over this. It's actually there's a lot of them. You can see there's a whole bunch of them. It depends on what kind of class, what kind of career you have, and different things you can do. And this goes into real nitty-gritty stuff. Here, a lot of players might not even think about this kind of stuff. So here's an example body. I'll just use this as one example. So once per round on your turn as a character, the character may perform a maneuver to guard another character who is engaged in combat. Until the next turn, any melee or range attacks targeting the guided character adds a black dice. So you know I talked about the setback dice. So any enemies who attack this character who's being blocked now has to have a black dice, which makes the roll more difficult. So there's little stuff like that that they add, and again, it's very in depth. I mean, you could spend a month studying this book and all the different things in it. So it really is world building. You're building a world with your imagination, and it's kind of a tough thing to do because you have to put a lot of thought into it, but it's very fun. And you can dumb it down, I say dumb it down in the quotes, you can make it more simplistic if you want to. Let's say you don't want to use any of this stuff. That's okay. Let's say you just want to do combat. You can do that if you want to. It's up to you. So, um, we're going to skip all this. This is why the book is 253 pages, because it has a bunch of pages like this. Gear and equipment. This is a pretty cool part. This is where all the guns and the different stuff you can buy. You can go to a store, and a lot of times you'll buy different types of gear. When you first start the game, I think you usually start with 1,500 credits, I think. And a lot of times you can buy a gun. No, you start with 500 credits, which is not a lot. I usually, I try to be nice and give players a little bit of extra credits at the beginning of the game so they can, get a pretty good weapon, because weapons, they can be expensive. So each weapon sometimes has these passives or these abilities. So let's say you have a machine gun, it might have an auto fire ability. Let's say you have a grenade, it might have a blast ability. So different weapons have different things. Another thing with combat is critical ratings. Now, a critical rating, basically there's a threshold for how many of these advantage symbols you need. So let's say you roll and you get, you get more advantages than you have disadvantages, but you have 3 extra advantages, and you're shooting or using a weapon that says crit 3. That means if you get 3 advantages extra, you will deal a critical hit. And critical hits can do different things. They can injure opponents in different ways. So here's some of the weapons: blaster rifles, heavy blaster rifle, repeating blaster, bowcaster, that's Chewbacca's weapon, pistols. Here's a chart that shows here's all the damage numbers and how many advantages you need in order to crit, their range, their encumbrance. I actually usually don't even think about encumbrance. I'll let players have as much stuff as they want. I'm not going to limit them to how much they carry. That's kind of more in depth. HP, so how much it takes to really destroy this item or damage it, how much it costs. You can see you're supposed to start off the game with 500 credits, and you can see how expensive these weapons are. So I like to give characters 1,500 gold, so that if they want to well, they can't buy this because it's rare. See, they are. But say they want to buy a blast rifle, they can do it, because I want them to have a weapon if they want it. When they start out, makes it more fun. It also allows you to put harder enemies in the game, which I like to do. I like to put really hard enemies. So those are some weapons. They have grenades, flame projectors, thermal detonators. These are melee weapons right here. And of course, there's armor as well. Armor's pretty expensive. And again, you have that soak number, which is how much damage you soak up before any other real damage is applied to your health. So let's say you have 12 health and you have 5 soak, right? Someone shoots you with a gun and that gun does 7 damage. Because you have 5 soak, 5 of that 7 damage is ignored, and then only 2 damage goes through and deals damage to you, which means you're left with 10 health because you only take 2 damage. You have 12 starting out. So that's what soak is. And then damage adds extra to, defense adds more to that as well. So, A lot of stuff to remember. Here's some gear. Comlink is like a Star Wars walkie-talkie. Um, they have lots of different types of gear. Cybernetic, which is basically like mechanical arms or mechanical legs. They give you, bonus stats. You can have mechanical eyes, like bionic. You can be half human, half cybernetic, which is pretty cool. I actually have. I'm trying to get a scenario going soon with my friends, and one of the main parts of the mission is they have to infiltrate a weapons base, and in the weapons base there is a almost like a mad scientist, and he is working on cybernetic limbs, and the players have to go to his lab and try to capture some of these cybernetic stuff. And what I'm going to do is if they're able to get there and get these stuff, I'll let them keep them. So the next time we play, they can now use these things that they've collected. So I think that's going to be pretty fun. Different like goggles, kind of like binoculars, disguise kit, which will come in use very often in this game. These are the things that will heal you if you're damaged. Very helpful to have. Stim packs are the main one you want to use. Slicer gear is how people hack. If you want to hack into a computer, you'll need some slicer gear to do it. And there's normal stuff like backpack climbing gear too. Climbing gear, a lot of times if you're doing an athletics check, or let's say you're climbing and that will do an athletic check, you'll add like a blue dice because you have this or something like that, just to get a better chance that your roll will succeed. And there's more. I'm not sure how long I've been talking about this. I think that's a lot of it. We can keep looking though, I think this is pretty relaxing. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. So your weapons, they can have other additions, like they can have different sights, like I mentioned. So they can have a grip. These are a lot of different things. A grenade launcher, all really cool stuff. Armor attachments. Oh, combat. This is actually pretty good stuff to know too. So combat is pretty simple. I mean, I say that it's not, but it could be harder. So of course you roll for initiative, which allows people to know who goes first and when everyone goes. When you go into combat, you basically have one maneuver and one action. Now a maneuver can be walking, a maneuver can be aiming your weapon, a maneuver can be taking cover. There's a lot of different things that you can be considered a maneuver. The action is a little bit more specific, so the action could be firing, or it's basically whenever if you want to do a roll, that would be your action. So let's say you go into the store. If you roll for negotiation, that would be your action. If you're in combat and you roll for a long range attack, that's your action. So you have maneuver, and then there are also these things called incidentals, which are like really small things that you can do freely. But you have maneuver and you have an action. So let's say you're standing 10 feet from a character. Your maneuver could be to walk towards that character, and your action could be to stab them with a knife, or you hit him with a vibro axe or something like that. So that's usually how combat works. And of course you roll for the character. So if you have a long range gun, you roll for long range. And then if you have extra advantages, you might be able to crit. So yeah, combat isn't too bad. And of course there are different difficulty checks for when you do combat, depending on how hard the character is to hit. So, here's what I just talked about. They're incidentals. So here are examples: speaking to a character, dropping off an item. So when you say speaking to a character, that's not rolling. So let's say you're on a ship with your teammates, or whatever they're called, and you just say something to them. That's not a maneuver in action. You're just speaking. It's fine. minor movements, shifting position, peeking around a corner. Maneuver is more diving behind cover, opening a door. Then the actions are when you're rolling, so hacking into a computer, firing a weapon, open a door, a locked door, climbing a cliff. So these are more like it's kind of like the most important part of your turn. And you see it goes into so much. Of course, you have to think about how close you are to someone. Like, there's some weapons that are close range, some that are medium, long, extreme range. I don't think there are any extreme weapons that can fire extreme range. There may be some, but usually if you're extreme range, you can't use weapons. And I mean, there's so many roles in this game, it's hard to keep track. Even if you're a GM and you kind of like study up, it's really hard to keep track of everything. When I do it, I definitely try to do my best to get everything in there, because it does make it more fun. If the more you add to your narrative when you're GM, the more the players get out of it. So if you add more situations that people can do, that's good. You can also kind of add some dimensions to it by saying, when you write the scenario, say if they go left down this path, they'll go to this. If they go right down the other path, they'll go to this, and just kind of prepare for players to make their own decisions, so it's not like one linear narrative. It makes them feel a little bit more free. Now, it takes some more effort to do stuff like that, but if you make it open yet still limited, you can control it in a way that allows it to feel very free, but just adds a lot of complexity, and I think it makes it more challenging. You can draw a map and add all these obstacles in there, and for a player to get past this obstacle, they have to roll for coordination. For them to get past that, they have to roll for athletics. You can do so many different things like that. And to me, I love that kind of stuff. I love it because it allows me to be creative. This game is great for someone who's creative. And one thing I've noticed with people who make ASMR or watch ASMR, they are the most creative people out there. They're so creative. There are people out there who are doing ASMR videos, and they're doing things that I would have never thought of. These role plays that are just super in depth and cool. And so I think people who watch ASMR most of them are very creative, and I appreciate that a lot, because I love to be creative. That's what gets me going. It gets me excited, because I get to explore all these new things. So, and of course, there are different environmental factors too. So these could add difficulty to checks. So let's say there's no air, so that means every turn you have to take away a strain threshold because you can't breathe. Or let's say you're breathing in polluted air. That means every time you have a turn, you have to take a strain, or you have to roll, or any checks you do have to add another black dice or something. Like, you can do different things like that. And just kind of make your own. So I think we're getting to the end here. Here's a chart talking about the critical hits. So like I said, if you get enough advantages to roll a crit, what you do is you roll these 10-sided dice, and they go from 0 to 100, and you roll 2 of them. I'm pretty sure. Oh wait, no, you just roll 1. Oh no, I think you roll 2. I might be. I'm a little unsure about that, but I think you roll 2, and then depending on what it adds up to, you get to have a certain thing. So you roll 71 to 75. The person that you just critically hit now is hamstrung, and they lose a free maneuver until the end of the encounter. So there are different things that you can get, and then of course the the highest one is death. It's pretty hard to kill someone in this. A lot of times, if you are fighting with other characters, they just kind of get incapacitated or they just pass out or something, you know. Um, so you can recover from wounds. Back to tank if you ever saw uh, episode 5 when Luke gets put into the stomach of that creature. I can't remember the name of it. A tauntaun, right? He gets in the stomach of a tauntaun. I knew I'd get eventually. And he's in the freezing cold on Hoth, and then he goes into that tank. That's a back to tank, so that's good for healing wounds and stuff. So vehicles, I'm not gonna go into the vehicles very much. I think I might actually end it around there, because the vehicles are kind of near the end of it. So if people are interested in this kind of stuff, maybe they want to learn more, um, you know, you can let me know, and maybe we can talk about it or something, and through messaging or something. You know, this is, I'm sure, a topic that most people don't know, or maybe they haven't seen this game before, and it's, you know, kind of brand new to them. If you have seen the game, please let me know, like, what scenarios you've done, or, like, different things you might have played, or if you've done something similar, some kind of role-playing game, because this one is really, really fun, and if you like Star Wars, check this game out. So, as I said, if you just look up Star Wars RPG is the first one, and there are different types, so there's Edge of the Empire, which is this book. There's Force and Destiny. There's Age of Rebellion. I think there's another one too. But they're different types, and that's just like different characters, different types of weapons, and like different. There's a lot of different factors that go into each book, and it will help you create a different storyline. So that's kind of a general overview. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was relaxing. If you're on your way to bed, I hope you sleep well, and thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.